On a crisp autumn morning in October 2019, 34-year-old Sarah Mitchell stood at the corner of Maple Street and Briarwood Lane in the quiet town of Millbrook, Indiana, holding the hand of her 7-year-old son, Ethan. The school bus was running 3 minutes late. By 7:22 a.m. they were gone. No witnesses, no screams, no struggle. A mother and her child had simply vanished. What followed would become one of the most intensive missing persons investigations in Indiana state history. A desperate search that would consume an entire community, expose dark secrets hidden beneath small-town facades, and ultimately reveal a predator who had been watching, waiting, and planning for months. This is the story of Sarah and Ethan Mitchell, and the monster who stole them from the world. Before we dive into this haunting story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Millbrook, Indiana, sits roughly 40 miles southeast of Indianapolis, nestled among the endless cornfields and quiet county roads that define America's heartland. With a population of just under 12,000 residents, it was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, where Friday night football games drew the entire town, and where children still rode their bicycles until the streetlights flickered on. It was exactly the kind of place Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell had been searching for. Born Sarah Elizabeth Carver on March 3, 1985, she had grown up in Millbrook, the youngest of 3 children born to Robert and Linda Carver. Her father worked as a foreman at the local grain elevator, while her mother taught 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary, the very same school that Sarah would later attend, and where her own son would eventually enroll decades later. Friends and family would later describe young Sarah as a ray of sunshine, a girl with an infectious laugh, an artistic spirit, and an unwavering kindness that seemed almost out of place in a world that could be so cruel. Sarah was the kind of kid who noticed when someone was sitting alone at lunch. Her childhood friend, Jennifer Rawlings, would recall years later in an interview with local news station WTHR. She'd just walk right over, sit down, and start talking like you'd been friends forever. That was just who she was. She made everyone feel seen. After graduating from Millbrook High School in 2003, Sarah pursued her passion for art at Indiana University, earning a degree in graphic design. It was there, during her junior year, that she met David Allen Mitchell, a pre-law student with charm to spare and ambition that seemed boundless. The courtship was swift. The marriage came just 18 months after their first date. We all had concerns, Sarah's older brother, Thomas Carver, would later admit. David was intense, controlling in ways that weren't obvious at first, but Sarah was in love. And when Sarah loved someone, she loved with her whole heart. The couple settled in Indianapolis, where David pursued his career in corporate law, and Sarah found work as a freelance graphic designer. For a time, the marriage seemed stable, perhaps even happy. And on June the 8th, 2012, that happiness was cemented with the birth of their only child, Ethan David Mitchell. Ethan was, by all accounts, a miracle. Sarah had suffered 2 miscarriages before his birth, each loss carving deeper into her heart. When Ethan finally arrived, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with his mother's bright blue eyes and his father's dark curly hair, Sarah devoted herself entirely to motherhood. She was the best mom I've ever seen, Jennifer Rawlings stated. Everything she did was for that little boy. Every decision, every choice, Ethan came first, always. But behind the closed doors of their Indianapolis townhouse, the Mitchell marriage was crumbling. David Mitchell's legal career had stalled. He had been passed over for partner twice, and the rejection had curdled something inside him. The charm that had once won Sarah's heart twisted into something darker, controlling behavior, emotional manipulation, and increasingly volatile outbursts. While there were no documented incidents of physical violence, court records from the couple's 2017 divorce proceedings paint a troubling picture. Sarah's petition cited emotional abuse, coercive control, and an environment unsafe for the mental well-being of our minor child. The divorce was finalized in November 2017. Sarah was granted full custody of Ethan. David was awarded supervised visitation every other weekend. Visitation rights he would exercise fewer than a dozen times before seemingly losing interest in his son altogether. David checked out, Thomas Carver explained. Once he realized he couldn't control Sarah anymore, he just disappeared from Ethan's life. Moved to Chicago for some new job. Barely called. That little boy waited by the phone so many times, and his father just couldn't be bothered. In January 2018, Sarah made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her life and tragically seal her fate. She moved back to Millbrook. The small town welcomed her with open arms. Her parents, now retired, were overjoyed to have their daughter and grandson close by. Sarah found a modest but charming 2-bedroom rental on Sycamore Drive, just a 10-minute walk from the elementary school where her mother had once taught. She secured remote freelance work with a marketing firm in Indianapolis, allowing her to work from home while being present for Ethan's every milestone. And Ethan? He thrived. That boy came alive in Millbrook, said Patricia Hendricks, a neighbor who lived 3 doors down from the Mitchell rental. When they first moved in, he was so quiet, timid. You could tell he'd been through something hard. But within a few months, he was riding his bike up and down the street, laughing and playing with the other kids. Sarah gave him a real childhood. Ethan enrolled at Millbrook Elementary in the fall of 2018 and quickly became a favorite among teachers and classmates alike. His second-grade teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, remembered him as curious, imaginative, and kind beyond his years. He loved dinosaurs, Mrs. Chen would later tell investigators, her voice cracking. He wanted to be a paleontologist. He'd bring me these little drawings of T-Rexes and Triceratops, so detailed for a 7-year-old. I still have one pinned to my refrigerator. I couldn't throw it away. By October 2019, Sarah and Ethan had built a life in Millbrook that finally felt safe. Sarah had begun dating again, cautiously, quietly, and had recently started seeing a local veterinarian named Marcus Webb. Their relationship was new but promising, a gentle reminder that love after trauma was possible. She had reconnected with old friends, joined the PTA, and volunteered at the church her parents attended. For the first time in years, Sarah Mitchell was happy. October 15th, 2019, was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday. Ethan had a spelling test that morning. Sarah had a client call scheduled for 9 a.m. They had plans to carve pumpkins that evening. Ethan had already picked out the biggest one from the grocery store display. At approximately 7:15 a.m., Sarah and Ethan walked out their front door, hand in hand, and began the short walk to the bus stop at the corner of Maple Street and Briarwood Lane. The bus was scheduled to arrive at 7:19 a.m. It arrived at 7:22 a.m., 3 minutes late, due to a minor traffic backup on County Road 450. When the doors opened, the driver, 61-year-old Harold Benson, looked out at an empty corner. Sarah and Ethan Mitchell were gone. The morning of October 15th, 2019, began like any other in Millbrook, Indiana. At 6:00 a.m., the sun crept over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. A light fog clung to the fields surrounding the town, the kind of autumn mist that burns off by mid-morning but lends an ethereal quality to the early hours. The temperature hovered around 47 degrees Fahrenheit. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. It was, by all measurable standards, a beautiful day. Inside the rental house at 1847 Sycamore Drive, Sarah Mitchell's alarm went off at 6:15 a.m., as it did every weekday morning. According to phone records later subpoenaed by investigators, she checked her email at 6:23 a.m., scrolled briefly through Facebook at 6:31 a.m., and sent a text message to her mother at 6:47 a.m. The message read, "Happy Tuesday. Can we still do dinner tonight? Ethan wants to show you his spelling test. He's been practicing all week." Linda Carver responded at 6:52 a.m. "Of course, sweetheart. Dad's making his famous chili. See you at 6. Love you both." Sarah replied with 3 heart emojis. It would be the last message she ever sent. At approximately 7:05 a.m., neighbor Patricia Hendricks observed Sarah and Ethan preparing to leave the house. Hendricks was retrieving her morning newspaper from the driveway when she spotted them through her kitchen window. Sarah was zipping up Ethan's jacket, Hendricks would later tell police. It was chilly that morning, and she was always so attentive about making sure he was warm. Ethan had his backpack on. It was blue, I remember, with dinosaurs on it. He was bouncing on his heels like kids do when they're excited about something. At 7:12 a.m., security camera footage from a house 2 blocks away on Briarwood Lane captured Sarah and Ethan walking south towards the bus stop. The footage is grainy. The camera was primarily positioned to monitor the homeowner's driveway, but the figures are unmistakably recognizable. Sarah wore a burgundy cardigan over a white blouse, dark jeans, and brown ankle boots. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Ethan walked beside her in his blue dinosaur backpack, a gray hoodie, jeans, and light-up sneakers. They were holding hands. At 7:14 a.m., they passed out of the camera's frame, walking toward the intersection of Maple Street and Briarwood Lane, their designated bus stop, just 180 feet ahead. That is the last confirmed sighting of Sarah and Ethan Mitchell alive. The school bus, Route 7, was operated by 61-year-old Harold Benson, a retired factory worker who had been driving for the Millbrook School District for 11 years. Benson's route covered the northern residential areas of town, and the Maple Street stop was his 8th pickup of the morning. According to GPS data logged by the bus company, Route 7 arrived at Maple Street and Briarwood Lane at 7:22 a.m., 3 minutes behind schedule. There was a backup on 450 near the grain elevator, Benson explained in his initial statement to police. Combine was moving slow, bunch of cars behind it. Added a few minutes to my route. Happens sometimes during harvest season. When Benson opened the bus doors at 7:22 a.m., he expected to see Sarah Mitchell waiting with her son, as she did every morning. The corner was empty. I thought maybe they were running late, Benson recalled. It happens. Parents oversleep, kids can't find their shoes, normal stuff. I waited about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, honked twice. Nobody came. Standard protocol allowed drivers to wait a maximum of 90 seconds at each stop before proceeding. Benson followed protocol. At 7:24 a.m., Route 7 continued down Maple Street toward the next pickup. Harold Benson had no reason to believe anything was wrong. But Sarah Mitchell had never missed the bus before. The first alarm was raised at 9:17 a.m. Sarah had a scheduled video conference call with a client at 9 a.m., a routine check-in with a marketing firm in Indianapolis that she had worked with for nearly 2 years. When Sarah failed to log in at the appointed time, her contact, Senior Account Manager Rebecca Torres, sent a text message. "Hey Sarah, are we still on for 9? Just want to make sure you got the calendar invite." No response. Torres waited 15 minutes before trying again. Then she called. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "I wasn't worried at first," Torres would later explain. "Things happen. Maybe her internet went down, or Ethan got sick and she forgot to reschedule." But Sarah was always so professional, so reliable. It wasn't like her to just ghost a meeting. Meanwhile, at Millbrook Elementary School, Ethan Mitchell's absence had been noted by Mrs. Dorothy Chen during morning attendance at 8:05 a.m. Following standard procedure, the school's front office attempted to contact Sarah Mitchell to confirm the absence. The call went to voicemail. A second call was placed at 9:45 a.m. Again, voicemail. "We typically give parents until mid-morning to respond," explained Principal Barbara Owens. "Unexcused absences require follow-up, but sometimes there's a miscommunication or a last-minute appointment." We weren't panicking. Not yet. At 10:30 a.m., Linda Carver grew concerned. She had sent Sarah a text at 10:15 a.m., asking what time she planned to bring Ethan for dinner that evening. The message showed as delivered, but not read. Linda called. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. "That wasn't like Sarah," Linda would later tell investigators, tears streaming down her face. "She always answered my calls, always. And if she couldn't answer, she'd text back within minutes. Something felt wrong. I knew it in my gut. A mother knows." At 10:47 a.m., Linda Carver drove to her daughter's rental house on Sycamore Drive. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She tried the doorbell. Nothing. She walked around to the back of the house and peered through the kitchen window. The lights were off. No movement inside. Sarah's car, a silver 2016 Honda CR-V, was parked in the driveway, exactly where it always sat. If Sarah had gone somewhere, she hadn't driven. Linda Carver called her husband. Then she called her son, Thomas. Then, at 11:02 a.m., she called 911. "I'd like to report a missing person," she told the dispatcher, her voice trembling. "My daughter and grandson. They're gone. Something's happened to them. I know something's happened." The Millbrook Police Department received the call and dispatched Officer Daniel Reyes to 1847 Sycamore Drive. Reyes arrived at 11:14 a.m. and conducted an initial welfare check. After receiving no response at the front or back doors, and with Linda Carver's consent as an emergency contact listed on the rental agreement, Reyes requested permission to enter the premises. What he found inside only deepened the mystery. The house was immaculate. Breakfast dishes, 2 bowls, 2 spoons, a box of Cheerios, and a half-empty carton of milk sat on the kitchen table, as if abandoned mid-meal. Sarah's purse hung on a hook by the front door, her wallet still inside. Her cell phone was on the kitchen counter, plugged into a charging cable. Ethan's bedroom showed signs of a normal morning. Pajamas tossed on the unmade bed. Dinosaur toys scattered across the floor. A spelling worksheet on his desk with careful, childish handwriting. Everything suggested that Sarah and Ethan had intended to return home. They had simply walked out the front door and never come back. There were no signs of forced entry, Officer Reyes noted in his report. No signs of struggle. No evidence of foul play within the residence. The subjects appeared to have left voluntarily, on foot, leaving behind personal belongings, including identification, money, and electronics. But the most chilling detail was discovered on the kitchen table beside the abandoned breakfast bowls. A single sheet of paper, Ethan's spelling test study guide with a handwritten note from Sarah in the margin. "You're going to do amazing today. I'm so proud of you. Love, Mom." Ethan never made it to school to take that test. By noon, the Millbrook Police Department had officially classified Sarah and Ethan Mitchell as missing persons under suspicious circumstances. Within an hour, the case would be escalated to a full-scale search operation, drawing resources from county sheriff's offices, the Indiana State Police, and eventually the FBI. The quiet town of Millbrook was about to become the center of a nightmare. Within hours of Linda Carver's 911 call, the small town of Millbrook transformed into a command center for what would become one of the largest search operations in Indiana state history. By 2 p.m. on October 15, 2019, the Millbrook Police Department had established a mobile command post in the parking lot of Millbrook Community Church, just 4 blocks from the bus stop where Sarah and Ethan Mitchell were last seen. Police Chief Harold Montgomery, a 32-year veteran of law enforcement who had served as Millbrook's chief for the past decade, took personal command of the investigation. "In all my years on this job, I've never seen a case that gripped this community the way this one did," Montgomery would later reflect in a press conference. Sarah and Ethan weren't strangers. They were our neighbors, our friends. That little boy went to school with our children. When they disappeared, it felt like our town lost its innocence. The initial search focused on a 1-mile radius surrounding the bus stop at Maple Street and Briarwood Lane. Officers went door to door, canvassing every residence, questioning every potential witness. The results were frustratingly sparse. Patricia Hendricks confirmed seeing Sarah and Ethan leave their house at approximately 7:05 a.m. Security footage from Briarwood Lane captured them walking toward the bus stop at 7:12 a.m. After that, nothing. No one reported seeing Sarah and Ethan arrive at the bus stop. No one reported seeing them leave. No one reported hearing any unusual sounds, no screams, no car engines, no commotion of any kind. It was as if they had simply stepped off the edge of the world. We interviewed 37 residents in the immediate vicinity on that first day. Detective Maria Santos, the lead investigator assigned to the case, would later explain. Not one person saw anything after 7:12 a.m. It was like they vanished into thin air. But Detective Santos didn't believe in vanishing acts. In her 18 years with the Indiana State Police, she had worked dozens of missing persons cases, including several high-profile child abductions. She knew that people don't disappear without a trace. There is always a trace. You just have to find it. At 4:30 p.m., the search expanded. Over 200 volunteers from Millbrook and surrounding communities gathered at the church parking lot to receive instructions. They were divided into grid teams and deployed to search fields, forests, abandoned properties, and drainage ditches within a 5-mile radius. The Indiana State Police contributed helicopter support, conducting aerial surveys of the farmland surrounding the town. K-9 units from 3 different counties were brought in, trained dogs sniffing for any trace of the missing mother and child. By nightfall, the search had yielded no results. No bodies, no clothing, no evidence of where Sarah and Ethan had gone. But as the physical search continued through the night, volunteers carrying flashlights through fog-shrouded cornfields, their breath visible in the cold October air. Detective Santos focused on a different kind of investigation. She began building a timeline. Working backwards from the last confirmed sighting, Santos and her team reconstructed Sarah Mitchell's life with meticulous precision. Phone records, bank statements, social media activity, interviews with family, friends, co-workers, and acquaintances. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes of a broken marriage. Sarah was happy, confirmed Marcus Webb, the veterinarian Sarah had been dating for the past 3 months. We were taking things slow. She was cautious, understandably, after what she went through with her ex-husband. But things were good. We had talked about maybe taking a trip together after the holidays. She was excited about the future. Webb provided a solid alibi for the morning of October 15th. He had been at his veterinary clinic since 6:30 a.m., with multiple witnesses and time-stamped patient records confirming his presence. He was quickly ruled out as a suspect, but one name kept surfacing in the investigation: David Mitchell. Sarah's ex-husband had relocated to Chicago following their divorce, taking a position at a mid-sized corporate law firm. According to divorce records, he had been ordered to pay child support of $1,400 per month and was entitled to supervised visitation with Ethan every other weekend. The visitation had largely gone unused. David had seen his son fewer than a dozen times in the 2 years since the divorce. "We need to find David Mitchell," Santos told her team during a briefing on the evening of October 15th. Statistically, in cases involving missing children, family members, particularly estranged parents, are persons of interest until proven otherwise. Chicago PD was contacted at 9:47 p.m. At 11:32 p.m., officers located David Mitchell at his apartment in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. He was cooperative, almost surprisingly so. "I don't know anything about this," David told detectives during an initial interview conducted at the Chicago Police Department's 18th District Station. "I haven't spoken to Sarah in months. I haven't seen Ethan since Easter, maybe? I know I haven't been the father I should have been. I know that. But I would never hurt them. Never." David Mitchell's alibi checked out. Building security footage placed him entering his apartment at 11:47 p.m. on October 14th and not leaving until 8:15 a.m. on October 15th, well after Sarah and Ethan had disappeared, and over 3 hours away from Millbrook by car. He was ruled out as a suspect, though he would remain on the periphery of the investigation, as detectives explored the possibility that he might have hired someone else to take his son. That theory, too, would eventually be dismissed for lack of evidence. As the first 24 hours passed with no trace of Sarah and Ethan, hope began to give way to dread. Statistics painted a grim picture. In child abduction cases, the first 48 hours are critical. After that window closes, the likelihood of recovery alive drops precipitously. The community refused to give up. By October 16th, the volunteer search party had swelled to over 500 people. Local businesses donated food, water, and supplies for searchers. The Millbrook High School football team canceled practice so players could join the effort. Churches held prayer vigils that stretched through the night. Amber Alerts had been issued across Indiana and neighboring states. Sarah and Ethan's photos were broadcast on every local news station, their faces staring out from television screens and newspaper front pages. "Have you seen us?" the headlines asked. No one had. But then, on the morning of October 17th, 53 hours after they had vanished, the investigation took a dramatic turn. At 8:47 a.m., a farmer named Jeremiah Dalton was inspecting his property approximately 12 miles northeast of Millbrook, near the rural community of Hadley Corners. Dalton owned a 340-acre farm, much of it wooded, that had been in his family for 4 generations. He was checking fence lines near the back of his property when he noticed something unusual. Tire tracks. Fresh tire tracks leading off the gravel access road and into a wooded area that rarely saw vehicle traffic. Curious, Dalton followed the tracks on foot. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Approximately 200 yards into the woods, partially concealed by fallen branches and underbrush, sat a vehicle, a white panel van with no rear windows. The driver's door was slightly ajar, and there was blood on the ground beside it. Dalton didn't approach any closer. He turned, walked back to his truck as fast as his 68-year-old legs would carry him, and called 911. "I found something," he told the dispatcher, his voice shaking. "Out by Hadley Corners. There's a van and blood. I think it might be connected to those missing people." Within 30 minutes, the farm was swarming with law enforcement. Detective Maria Santos was on scene by 9:45 a.m. The van, a 2008 Ford E250, was registered to a commercial cleaning company based in Indianapolis. The company reported the vehicle had been stolen from their lot on October 10th, 5 days before Sarah and Ethan disappeared. A stolen vehicle, clearly chosen to avoid being traced back to its user. Inside the van, forensic technicians found a nightmare of evidence. 2 sets of zip tie restraints, 1 adult-sized, 1 child-sized, discarded on the floor. A roll of duct tape with apparent hair fibers adhered to the adhesive. A child's shoe-a-light-up sneaker, size 13, consistent with what Ethan Mitchell had been wearing when he disappeared. And blood. Blood on the floor of the van. Blood on the door handle. Blood smeared on the interior walls. Not a massive quantity, not enough to suggest fatal injuries, but enough to confirm that violence had occurred. "When I saw that little shoe," Detective Santos would later admit in an interview, "I felt my heart crack. That was real. That was Ethan's. And I knew in that moment that whatever happened to this family, it wasn't going to have a happy ending." But the most critical piece of evidence wasn't visible to the naked eye. It was microscopic. Forensic technicians collected samples from every surface of the van: blood, hair, fiber, fingerprints. The evidence was rushed to the Indiana State Police Forensic Laboratory in Indianapolis for analysis. Meanwhile, the search shifted to the woods surrounding the abandoned vehicle. K-9 units were deployed. A grid search began, expanding outward from the van in concentric circles. At 4:17 p.m. on October 17th, a search dog named Bruno, a Belgian Malinois handled by Deputy Eric Stanton of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, alerted to a scent approximately 400 yards northeast of the van. Searchers converged on the location. There, in a shallow depression beside a fallen oak tree, covered hastily with leaves and branches, they found them. Sarah Mitchell, Ethan Mitchell, mother and son, together in death as they had been in life. Sarah lay on her back, her arms wrapped protectively around her child, as if shielding him even in her final moments. Ethan was curled against her chest, his small hands gripping her burgundy cardigan. The scene was simultaneously heartbreaking and horrifying. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, Deputy Stanton said in his official report, his handwriting shaky on the page. I've seen things that would give most people nightmares. But this, a mother holding her child like that? I had to step away. I had to call my own kids and tell them I loved them. Medical examiner Dr. Ruth Okonkwo arrived on scene at 5:45 p.m. to conduct a preliminary assessment. The bodies were carefully documented, photographed, and ultimately transported to the Marion County Coroner's Office for full autopsy. The findings would be released 72 hours later. Sarah Mitchell had died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with repeated strikes from a heavy, rounded object, possibly a hammer or pipe. She had also sustained defensive wounds on her hands and forearms, indicating she had fought back against her attacker. Time of death was estimated between 7:15 a.m. and 9:04 a.m. on October 15th, within hours of her disappearance. Ethan Mitchell's cause of death was strangulation. There were no defensive wounds on his small body. His injuries suggested he had been restrained and unable to fight back. He had died sometime after his mother. The implication was devastating. Ethan may have been alive when his mother was killed. He may have witnessed it, and then he was murdered in cold blood. Millbrook had its worst fears confirmed. Sarah and Ethan were gone, and someone had killed them. Now the question became, who? The discovery of Sarah and Ethan Mitchell's bodies transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into a homicide inquiry, and Detective Maria Santos was determined to find their killer. Within hours of the bodies being recovered, the Indiana State Police established a dedicated task force. Detectives from the ISP, the FBI's Indianapolis field office, and local law enforcement pooled their resources. The clock was ticking. In homicide investigations, the first 72 hours are everything, Santos explained during a press briefing on October 18th. Evidence degrades, memories fade, suspects have time to establish alibis, destroy evidence, or flee the jurisdiction. We were racing against time from the moment those bodies were found. The investigation followed 3 parallel tracks. First, forensic evidence from the crime scenes. Second, Sarah Mitchell's personal history and relationships. Third, canvassing for witnesses who might have seen something on the morning of October 15th. The forensic evidence proved to be the most promising lead. Blood samples recovered from the stolen van were analyzed and compared against DNA profiles in the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. On October 19th, less than 48 hours after the bodies were discovered, the results came back. The blood was a match. Sarah Mitchell's blood was found throughout the vehicle, confirming she had been transported in the van after being attacked. But there was another profile present trace amounts of blood on the door handle and steering wheel that didn't belong to Sarah or Ethan. It belonged to the killer, and it matched a profile already in the system. Raymond Vincent Holt. The name landed on Detective Santos's desk like a thunderclap. Raymond Holt was 47 years old, a Millbrook native who had lived in the area his entire life. He worked as a maintenance technician for a property management company that serviced rental properties throughout the county, including, as Santos would soon discover, the property at 1847 Sycamore Drive, Sarah Mitchell's home. Holt's DNA was in the system because of a 2011 conviction for aggravated assault. He had served 18 months in state prison after attacking a woman in a bar parking lot in Columbus, Indiana. The victim, who survived the assault, had described Holt as a man who couldn't take no for an answer. Upon his release in 2013, Holt returned to Millbrook and secured employment with Hawthorne Property Management, a company that serviced dozens of rental properties in the area. including the house where Sarah Mitchell lived with her son. When I saw that connection, Santos later told reporters, everything clicked into place. We had our suspect. Now we just had to find him. A warrant was issued for Raymond Holt's arrest on October 19, 2019, at 6:14 p.m. He was nowhere to be found. Holt's apartment, a one-bedroom unit in a run-down complex on the outskirts of Millbrook, was empty. His truck was gone. His cell phone, which investigators attempted to ping, was either turned off or destroyed. Raymond Holt had vanished. A manhunt began. His photo was distributed to law enforcement agencies across the Midwest. His face appeared on news broadcasts alongside photos of Sarah and Ethan. Bolo B. On the lookout alerts were issued to every police department within 500 miles. But as the search for Holt intensified, investigators continued building their case, determined to understand not just who had killed Sarah and Ethan Mitchell, but why. What they uncovered was deeply disturbing. Raymond Holt had first encountered Sarah Mitchell in March 2018, just 2 months after she moved into the Sycamore Drive rental. Property records indicated that Holt was dispatched to 1847 Sycamore Drive on March 14, 2018, to repair a leaking faucet in the bathroom. It was a routine service call, lasting approximately 45 minutes. By all outward appearances, it was unremarkable, but something happened during that visit. Something shifted inside Raymond Holt's twisted mind. He became obsessed. The investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that painted Holt as a classic stalker. Work records from Hawthorne Property Management showed that Holt had been dispatched to Sarah's address 11 times between March 2018 and October 2019, far more frequently than any other property on his route. Some visits were legitimate maintenance calls, others were not. Former colleagues described Holt as volunteering for any service request that came from Sycamore Drive, sometimes claiming jobs that had been assigned to other technicians. He always wanted that address, said co-worker Dennis O'Brien. I remember thinking it was weird. Like, why would you care which house you got? A job's a job. But Ray, he was always asking about the Mitchell place. I figured maybe the tenant tipped well or something. Never thought... O'Brien paused, his voice trailing off. I never thought he was capable of something like this. But Raymond Holt's obsession extended far beyond unnecessary house calls. Investigators obtained warrants for Holt's apartment and personal effects. What they found inside was a shrine of horror. Hundreds of photographs of Sarah Mitchell, printed and taped to the walls of a bedroom closet. Photos of her walking to the bus stop. Photos of her shopping at the grocery store. Photos of her through the windows of her own home, clearly taken from outside without her knowledge. Some photos included Ethan walking beside his mother, playing in the yard, waiting at the bus stop. In one chilling image, Sarah was captured through her kitchen window, cooking dinner, completely unaware she was being watched. The photos were dated, organized chronologically, spanning 18 months. Raymond Holt had been stalking Sarah Mitchell for a year and a half. There were journals, too. Pages upon pages of handwritten entries detailing Holt's fantasies about Sarah. Some entries were romantic in nature, delusional imaginings of a relationship that existed only in his mind. Others were darker, more violent, describing what he wanted to do to the obstacles in his way. Ethan was mentioned repeatedly as an obstacle. The boy is always there, Holt had written in an entry dated September 22, 2019, just 3 weeks before the murders. She never goes anywhere without him. He looks at me with those eyes like he knows something. Maybe he does. Maybe that's why I'll have to deal with him, too. Detective Santos felt physically ill as she read the journals. This wasn't a crime of passion, she stated during a task force briefing. This was premeditated, meticulously planned. Raymond Holt had been fantasizing about taking Sarah Mitchell for over a year. He waited. He watched. And when the moment was right, he struck. The investigation revealed more details about the morning of October 15th. Security cameras from a gas station 1 mile from Jeremiah Dalton's farm captured the stolen white van traveling eastbound on County Road 600 at 7:38 a.m. Raymond Holt was visible through the driver's side window. Cell tower records placed Holt's phone in the vicinity of Maple Street at 7:14 a.m., precisely when Sarah and Ethan were walking toward the bus stop. And a single witness emerged. 81-year-old Gladys Patterson lived in a house on Briarwood Lane, 3 doors down from the bus stop intersection. She had been awake early that morning, unable to sleep, and had been sitting in her living room with a cup of tea. "I heard an engine," Patterson told investigators. "Not a car, something bigger. A van, maybe. It was idling. I didn't think much of it at the time. Lots of work vehicles come through here. But then I think I heard voices. Quick, like. And then doors closing. And then the engine, again, moving away." When asked why she hadn't reported this information sooner, Patterson's face crumpled with guilt. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't see anything. I just heard sounds. I didn't know that sweet woman and her little boy were being taken right down the street from me. If I had known, I would have called. I would have done something." The timeline was now clear. At approximately 7:14 a.m., Raymond Holt had been waiting in the stolen van near the bus stop. When Sarah and Ethan approached, he had intercepted them, likely through some ruse, perhaps pretending to be there for a maintenance emergency. The abduction had taken less than 2 minutes. By 7:16 a.m., Sarah and Ethan were inside the van, and Holt was driving away, heading toward the isolated woods where he would commit his horrific crimes. The bus arrived 6 minutes later to find an empty corner. No one had seen a thing. "He planned it perfectly," Santos acknowledged grimly. "He knew her routine. He knew what time she left the house. He knew the bus schedule. He knew exactly how much time he had, and he used every second of it." As the evidence mounted, the manhunt for Raymond Holt intensified. For 6 days he evaded capture. Reported sightings came in from across the Midwest, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky. Each lead was investigated. Each one led nowhere. Holt had seemingly vanished into thin air. Then, on October 25th, 2019, 10 days after Sarah and Ethan Mitchell disappeared, and 8 days after their bodies were found, the hunt came to an end. A state trooper in rural Missouri was conducting a routine patrol along Interstate 44, approximately 30 miles west of St. Louis, when he noticed a pickup truck parked at an abandoned rest stop. The truck's plates matched a vehicle registered to Raymond Vincent Holt. The trooper called for backup and approached the vehicle with caution. Raymond Holt was inside, slumped behind the steering wheel. He was alive, barely. Holt had attempted to take his own life, slashing his wrists with a utility knife. Blood covered the interior of the cab. He was pale, unresponsive, his pulse thready and weak. He was airlifted to a hospital in St. Louis, where surgeons worked for 3 hours to save his life. He survived, and 4 days later, when he was stable enough to be transported, Raymond Vincent Holt was extradited to Indiana to face charges of double homicide, kidnapping, and a litany of other offenses. Justice was coming, but first, he would have to answer for what he had done. Raymond Vincent Holt was formally charged on November 1st, 2019, in the Monroe County Superior Court. The charges were extensive: 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 2 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of stalking, 1 count of criminal confinement, 1 count of theft of a motor vehicle. If convicted on all counts, Holt faced the possibility of life in prison without the possibility of parole or, under Indiana law, the death penalty. Prosecutor Amanda Chen, the elected prosecutor for Monroe County, announced her intention to seek the maximum penalty allowable by law. Sarah and Ethan Mitchell were taken from their family, their community, and this world in an act of unimaginable cruelty. Chen stated at a press conference following the arraignment, "Raymond Holt planned this crime. He executed it with cold precision, and he showed no mercy to a 7-year-old child. The state of Indiana will pursue justice with the same determination." Holt was represented by public defender Marcus Green, a veteran criminal defense attorney assigned to the case after Holt claimed indigent status. At his arraignment, Holt pleaded not guilty to all charges, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Over the following months, as Holt awaited trial in the Monroe County Jail, investigators continued building their case. Additional forensic analysis confirmed that blood and DNA evidence from the stolen van matched both victims and the defendant. Fiber analysis linked material found on Holt's clothing to the burial site. Tool mark analysis suggested that the wounds on Sarah Mitchell's skull were consistent with a 20-ounce framing hammer, a tool commonly used by maintenance workers. A hammer, matching that description, was recovered from Holt's apartment, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. It had been cleaned with bleach, but trace amounts of blood remained, invisible to the naked eye, embedded in the metal grain. The blood was Sarah Mitchell's. As the trial date approached, defense attorney Marcus Green filed a series of motions attempting to suppress evidence, challenge the DNA analysis, and exclude the journals and photographs found in Holt's apartment. All motions were denied. On April 14, 2020, Raymond Holt changed his plea. In a closed hearing before Judge Patricia Yates, Holt entered a guilty plea to all charges. The decision appeared to catch even his own attorney by surprise. "My client has chosen to accept responsibility for his actions," Green told reporters outside the courthouse. "He understands the gravity of what he has done, and he has decided to spare the victim's family the trauma of a prolonged trial." But inside the courtroom, Holt's demeanor told a different story. According to court transcripts, when Judge Yates asked Holt to explain, in his own words, what he had done, his response was chilling. "I took what was mine," Holt stated flatly. "She was supposed to be with me. I gave her every chance. She just wouldn't see it. She wouldn't see me, so I took her." When asked about Ethan, Holt shrugged. "The boy was in the way. He was always in the way." Judge Yates, a jurist with over 20 years on the bench, later described the moment as one of the most disturbing of her career. "There was no remorse," she said in a post-trial interview. "No emotion. He spoke about killing a woman and a child the way you might discuss taking out the garbage. It was inhuman." Sentencing was scheduled for June 15, 2020. But due to complications from the COVID-19 pandemic, the proceeding was delayed until August 10th. On that day, Monroe County Courtroom 3 was filled to capacity family members, journalists, law enforcement officials, and citizens who had followed the case from the beginning. Sarah Mitchell's family was present in the front row. Robert and Linda Carver, their faces etched with grief. Thomas Carver, his jaw set with barely contained rage. Marcus Webb, who had loved Sarah and had been denied the chance to build a future with her. They had prepared victim impact statements. Linda Carver spoke first. "Sarah was my baby girl," she began, her voice trembling but strong. "From the moment she was born, she was pure light. She had this way of making everyone around her feel loved. And Ethan, my grandson, he was only 7 years old. He wanted to be a paleontologist. He wanted to dig up dinosaurs. He'll never get that chance. He'll never grow up. He'll never fall in love. He'll never have children of his own." Linda paused, tears streaming down her face. "Raymond Holt stole them from us. He stole Sarah's smile. He stole Ethan's laughter. He stole our future. And no sentence, no matter how severe, will ever fill the hole he left in our hearts." Thomas Carver's statement was shorter, but no less powerful. "I hope you rot," he said, staring directly at Holt. "I hope every day you spend in prison, you think about what you did. I hope you see their faces every time you close your eyes. You are not a man. You're a monster, and you deserve to suffer." Marcus Webb spoke last. "I only knew Sarah for 3 months," he said quietly. "But in those 3 months, I saw the woman she was, kind, strong, devoted to her son. She deserved a lifetime of happiness. She deserved to be loved. Instead, she met a man who confused obsession with love, and it cost her everything." Webb looked at Holt. "You didn't love her. You destroyed her, and I hope you never forget that." When the statements concluded, Judge Yates addressed the defendant. "Raymond Vincent Holt," she said, her voice steady and cold, "you have pleaded guilty to crimes of unspeakable cruelty. You took the lives of a woman and a child whose only crime was existing in a world you had twisted into your own delusional fantasy. You showed no mercy. You will receive none." She delivered the sentence: "For the murder of Sarah Mitchell, life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the murder of Ethan Mitchell, life in prison without the possibility of parole, to be served consecutively. For the remaining charges, an additional 45 years. Raymond Holt would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars." He showed no reaction as the sentence was read. He was escorted from the courtroom in shackles, flanked by armed deputies, and transported to the Indiana State Prison at Michigan City. He remains there today. The conviction of Raymond Holt brought a measure of justice to the Mitchell family, but no verdict could undo the devastation he had caused. In the months following the trial, the town of Millbrook struggled to heal. The bus stop at the corner of Maple Street and Briarwood Lane, the spot where Sarah and Ethan were last seen, became an informal memorial. Residents left flowers, stuffed animals, handwritten notes, and candles that flickered through the autumn nights. In October 2020, on the first anniversary of the disappearance, the town held a formal memorial service. Over 300 people gathered at Millbrook Community Church to remember Sarah and Ethan Mitchell. A scholarship was established in Ethan's name at Millbrook Elementary School. The Ethan Mitchell Memorial Scholarship for Young Scientists, awarded annually to a student who demonstrates curiosity, creativity, and kindness. The first recipient was a third grader named Aiden Foster, who, like Ethan, dreamed of studying dinosaurs. Sarah's family has become advocates for stalking awareness and prevention. Linda Carver now speaks at community events and schools, sharing her daughter's story and urging people to recognize the warning signs of obsessive behavior. If someone is watching you, following you, showing up where they shouldn't be, that's not love, Linda tells audiences. That's danger, Trust your instincts. Report suspicious behavior. It could save your life. Indiana legislators introduced Sarah's Law in 2021, proposing enhanced penalties for stalking-related offenses and requiring mandatory GPS monitoring for convicted stalkers upon release. The bill passed the state legislature with bipartisan support and was signed into law in March 2022. Governor Eric Holcomb, speaking at the signing ceremony, said, "Sarah and Ethan Mitchell's story is a tragedy that should never have happened. This law won't bring them back, but it may save other families from the horror they endured. That is their legacy." Detective Maria Santos, who led the investigation, retired from the Indiana State Police in 2023 after 30 years of service. In interviews, she often cites the Mitchell case as the most impactful of her career. "Every case stays with you," Santos has said. "But this one, a mother and her child, the way she was holding him when we found them. I think about that image every day. It reminds me why we do this job. It reminds me that every victim deserves someone who won't give up." As for Raymond Holt, he remains incarcerated at the Indiana State Prison. He has shown no signs of remorse. He has never apologized. According to prison records, he spends most of his time in solitary confinement, having proven to be a threat to other inmates. He will die behind bars. Today, the rental house at 1847 Sycamore Drive sits empty. New tenants moved in after the investigation concluded, but they left within months, unable to escape the shadow of what had happened there. The property has been vacant ever since. But every October, on the anniversary of Sarah and Ethan's disappearance, the community returns to that corner on Maple Street. They light candles. They share memories. They say their names. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Ethan David Mitchell. A mother who loved fiercely. A boy who dreamed of dinosaurs. Gone too soon, but never forgotten. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling these important stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What detail stood out to you most? What would you have done differently? And as always, stay safe out there.